Alright everyone, it finally happened. The fight that was first hyped up for us back in chapter 957, probably the most anticipated fight in One Piece history, Roger and Garp teaming up against Rocks. When this was first pitched to us by Sengoku, I absolutely lost my mind. It was one of the most hyped chapters in One Piece history. I think most readers at that point in time could not imagine something that exciting having been established for the narrative, and I think most readers were anticipating when, if ever, are we actually going to get to see this battle. Seriously, I remember that feeling so many years ago of just reading Sengoku's description of the incident and thinking, oh my god, this is so exciting, but at the same time, it felt like Oda was dangling this shiny object in front of us, and then he just threw it across the horizon, because I, and pretty much all readers knew in that moment that we probably weren't going to see this battle for a long time. But now we finally got it. It happened. The moment that we were all waiting for so long just took place in front of our very eyes, and I definitely feel like it lived up to expectations. I actually have a whole video coming this Tuesday delving into the fight, breaking down everything that I think Oda did so well. Did it live up to the hype? Did it live up to everyone's expectations? I have a lot to say about this one, so wait for next Tuesday's video, but I am of course going to talk about the fight somewhat today. But first, let's take care of some small business things. The bosses are here. This month you can get our brand new collection, the Boss Poster Collection. 15 dynamically illustrated One Piece villains, 15 hidden iconic moments. Get Cunning Crocodile with a hidden Straw Hat Alabasta send-off. Get Vicious Rob Lucci with a hidden Jet Gatling. Or Yonko Blackbeard with a hidden Crossroads of Fate. And many more. And this month, you can buy 2 posters and get any 2 posters free with the deal auto-applied at checkout. And here is the big news. If you get the buy 2 get 2 free deal, you also get a 3rd free bonus exclusive poster where you get to choose either Emu or Rocks. You can also pick up the entire collection at a massive bundle discount and get both Emu and Rocks for free. And to add a little extra, we are offering free worldwide shipping on all orders. Both Emu and Rocks are only available this month, and after this month, they'll never be available ever again. So get them before they go. And finally, if you want a shot at getting this entire collection for free, then just give us a follow on our brand new Instagram page, One Dream Studio. Everyone who follows our page is immediately entered into a giveaway where the winner will get the entire collection for free, so go follow us on Instagram right now. The winner will be announced on Monday, November 24th. Link in the description below. So, the disbanding of the Rocks Pirates. Whitebeard, Kaido, and Big Mom, I like the fact that Oda did establish basically the groundwork, the foundation for the paths that they would begin to go down. Kaido and Big Mom, we see basically the starting point of their long-term rivalry, but we can also see how their dynamic, based on the past events of the flashback, was able to be mended over the course of the Wano arc, and they were able to enter into an alliance yet again. In general, I think that this flashback did a lot for Kaido and Big Mom, at least for me personally, to make those two characters a lot more likable. And again, I think one of the best things Oda did was find a way to make it feel like, depending on who you favor, you could see how Kaido felt like he was right in this situation, and how Big Mom might feel that she's right in this situation. On Whitebeard's side of things, I think it is frankly kind of ridiculous that we met this dude named Polo, who is Marco's father, and that's basically how Whitebeard's crew kind of starts to get going. I personally feel like we are now straying into the Kishimoto Naruto territory, where you can kind of sort of just get to a point where you're overdoing it, with every generation almost feeling like a carbon copy of everybody in the next generation. Because the Polo design, and us knowing what Marco looks like now, it's just like, does everyone and their descendants need to really be doppelgangers? Because look, I like even seeing the Roger and Garp parallels to Ace and Luffy this chapter, but I do feel like those parallels begin to lose some weight when they're so widespread and common, and especially when it turns into just copy-pasting character designs. I also feel like with Whitebeard's whole thing of him basically turning into this gigantic father figure who takes in all the lost children, the lost sons of the sea, I'm surprised that his story didn't begin with Marco being one of his first sons that he took in. I presume that that happens later on. Maybe something bad happens to Polo dies, and then Whitebeard has to take his son Marco in. But I just feel like Marco, having been some sort of orphan at God Valley, would have been a great opportunity to get that sort of path for Whitebeard rolling, instead of this awkward sort of just like, well, I'm Polo, I'm this new guy, Whitebeard just come sail with me, and Whitebeard's like, whatever, and things go from there, is what we can assume. The other Rocks pirates in general, Shiki, Ganzui, Captain John, all going, doing their own thing. It's, I think it's interesting that we can kind of see the start of everyone's Emperor careers here between Whitebeard, Kaido, and Big Mom. With Shiki, you could also say that because he built this gigantic fleet later on in this era, a fleet that's actually bigger than both Whitebeard and Roger's fleets, their crews, ever became. Based on the Battle of Edwharf, Shiki actually had the most powerful pirate crew and fleet of this era by the time everything was said and done. So with Shiki, you could say that maybe the money and the treasure that he accumulated from God Valley was basically like the foundation stone for him to start building this gigantic fleet that none of the other great pirates could really compete with. So in that sense, if you kind of consider Shiki to be an emperor that went down too soon, then really we saw the start here of Whitebeard's empire, Kaido, Big Mom, and Shiki's. So I like that, but I still feel like maybe too much time was spent on Shiki, Ganzui, Captain John, their side stuff, while all the crazy cool stuff like everybody fighting against Imu was going on, or Roger and Garp's fight against Rocks. So it's tricky because Oda always has to balance the insane number of side characters that he adds to every storyline with the actual main events that readers want to see. But at the same time, once Oda does set up these side characters and their little ongoing storylines, it's like, well, now Oda's committed, he does actually have to show how those things tie up, so he does have to cut away from the main events to show what happens. Because case in point, I left reading this chapter with one question in my mind, which is, where's Garling? Where's Sommers? What happened to them? You know, is Garling still cut up? Was he able to recover? Was he taken on board one of the escape ships? Because Uranus is about to nuke the island, so they have to have gotten away somehow, right? So as you can see, it's a tricky situation where it's kind of like, okay, well, when Oda's taking away screen time to showcase these, like, random things that Shiki, Ganzui, Captain John, and such are doing that just don't feel that important or interesting in the grand scheme of things, it's like, well, this is wasted panel time. But then at the same time, when Oda doesn't show us the outcome of these sort of smaller side character storylines, then it can lead to things feeling like, well, that's a loose end that hasn't been tied up yet, so Oda, you need to show us what happened with these side characters. Can you tie up that loose end? So it can kind of become like a lose-lose situation. I think that's just naturally what happens when a story becomes flooded with too many characters and too many little subplots. To be clear, I have enjoyed everything about God Valley so far. I'm just observing that I think even in this more concentrated flashback, it's interesting that Oda still seems to have maybe a little bit of trouble devoting enough panel time to all the things that he has set up that are there to go around. What I did find interesting from the side characters this chapter was that Rayleigh and Gaban are actually going back for Roger. That's very curious because it already took a long time for them to get to the shore. So for them to go now back to Roger, who's still basically in the middle of the island, I'm genuinely surprised that Oda's taking the time to do that, because it seems like there's pretty much nothing left to be done. Rocks is defeated, there's no significant villains to be beaten now at this point, unless Garling's like supposed to get up and then Rayleigh and Gaban defeat him or something like that, but it feels like the climax already occurred. So I do wonder, is there something still yet to happen on God Valley, or are Rayleigh and Gaban just being sent back in as just Oda sort of symbolically showing that Rayleigh and Gaban are Roger's wings, they wouldn't abandon him, they did come back to back him up, even if the fight already happened to be over by the time that they arrive. But the crazy thing is that it seems like Imu is ordering the destruction of the island, and so we can presume that Uranus is coming soon, so basically they're gonna have to run all the way back, get Roger, and get all the way out. I really do wonder how Oda's going to manage time in this scenario, although I guess you could say that Uranus needs to fly all the way over from Marijua, so that in itself will take some time, and it would make sense how the Roger Pirates and Garp managed to get away in the meantime. Now, as for the fight itself, I thought that this fight was really cool. Oda just went crazy with all of the Haki lightning streaks. Pretty much every single attack, it felt like, was causing some huge Haki explosion that just covered the island. And big shouts to one of my favorite moments from this chapter, which was Dami reversing Rocks doing a solo sky split with just his own Conqueror's Haki release. We have never seen that before, so I feel like this is Oda just basically establishing, like, yeah, this guy right now is going beyond anything that we've had so far in One Piece, outside of, I guess, Joy Boy and, I guess, technically Imu. And while this fight was very epic, I also love the fact that it wasn't a straightforward, just triumphant victory for Garp and Roger. This was a complex situation. It was a very emotionally complex situation. Every single character in this battle did not actually want to fight. They were all deeply pained to be in this situation. I enjoyed the dialogue between Roger and Garp reflecting that. I also enjoyed them just talking a little bit more about how Haki works and what they're trying to do. And the final team combo was really cool, with both of them basically having little references to their future descendants, with Garp's attack basically being a lot like one of Luffy's classic Gatling punches, and Roger's attack referencing Ace. And I feel like Roger's attack looked really cool to me visually because it kind of reminded me of one of like Demon Slayer's sort of breathing style attacks, if you know that series. So I love the fight, love the finale. I can only help but feel like I wish that we could have had a bit more space to see the fight play out this chapter, but we got close to a full chapter of it, about a half chapter of Roger and Garp versus Rox. Considering it's a flashback, that's pretty damn good. And if this chapter was action, well then next chapter is probably set to be an extremely emotionally powerful chapter, because we should be getting a final send-off for Rox if this is in fact his death. Oda loves doing death scenes. He will do death scenes even when he's not even planning on actually killing the character. So I fully expect next chapter to be a sort of tragic final moments of Rox. We may even get a little bit of a flashback to his childhood, because we actually don't really know where Rox's path and his motivations and everything like that started. We just basically saw the beginning of his story kicking off with him throwing down the gauntlet with Imu. So what led him to that point? I wonder if we're going to get some of that, and I imagine it will feel very tragic. We probably will see some more of his relationship with Eris. So I'm basically expecting a little bit of a flashback within a flashback next chapter. Most One Piece backstories end with some level of tragedy, and obviously Rox is the tragedy that we were all building up to here. And finally, I have a message from the Voice of the People, my top tier of patrons. So Dice and Lorenzo Linares both had similar commentary. Dice said that the fact that all three of our future emperors just walked off comes across as Oda not knowing how to handle their fallout, or just really wanting the epic showdown of Rox versus Roger and Garp. The whole thing felt forced just to get to the 2v1, feels especially out of character for Whitebeard. Lorenzo Linares said that the betrayal that made Rox be like, all pirates will always betray you, being the result of Dami reversing Rox, attacking him is dumb. It could have been better if he was involved in the situation where Gonzui betrayed Captain John and Shiki for the gold. So I do feel that. I do feel like it was kind of weird how all these pirates showed up to back Rox, you know, like the three Yonko came to back Rox against Imu himself. And then what happened is basically Imu pierces Rox, holds Rox up in front of everybody, has an extended, long monologue about what he is about to do to Rox, which is that he is going to turn him into a puppet. Then he has Rox literally physically transform. I think it would be easier to suspend our disbelief and imagine that Kaido, Whitebeard, Big Mom couldn't comprehend what's happening if Rox didn't transform. But Rox did transform. He literally became a lot bigger, he grew fangs, he grew gigantic demonic wings. While you could make the argument that it all happened so fast, it really didn't. They had a lot of time to watch Rox, listen to what Imu was saying, see Rox's whole transformation, and they all had their individual commentary about what Rox is doing, and they saw him begin to act extremely out of character one after another. So it is a little silly for them to come away from this whole thing feeling so deeply betrayed by Rox, and all of them basically taking a hit from them and just like dispersing after that. However, I will say this. My feeling has always been that One Piece is a series that the strength is generally going to be emotion more than logic. Not to say One Piece is like totally illogical, it's just that I always feel like Oda is trying to get to some more emotional story setups and emotional scenes, and his path to getting there, he might have to cut a few corners that might be a little bit like, okay, this doesn't make the most sense logically, or he might ask us to suspend our sense of disbelief as to what makes sense in certain situations, because he wants to get to the big thing. And in this case, the big thing was basically, he wanted to create the sense that, okay, everybody else has left, and now it's just Roger and Garp locked into an emotional battle with Rox, who has basically fallen. Oda wanted that scene, and I think that that scene plays out really well. I think just some of the steps around it as to how the other Yonko were disposed of, because Oda also wanted the scene of all 6 of them attacking Imu at the same time. So the process of getting from that scene to this next scene of the 2v1 did require Oda to basically be like, okay, well, now this transformation happens and everything like that, but the 3 Yonko characters, they just don't really get what happens and then they leave. So the bridge can feel a little bit like, okay, we kind of just gotta roll with it. And I think lots of times in the story, Oda asks us to basically just roll with something because he's building to something that's really, really good. And in this scenario, I'm cool with kind of just rolling with it and being like, okay, I agree it's kind of silly how that happened. If there was more time, I'm sure Oda would have fleshed out that situation more, but Oda only has so much time, or he only allocates so much time to get through certain beats of the story. It is what it is. I love the fight, and I love the emotions that came out of this fight. I'm kind of just going to ignore the whole Kaido being so deeply traumatized by how pirates will betray you thing, because it's just like, I can even go back in Wano and just kind of ignore that line, because I'm like, that line doesn't even matter in Wano. It actually leads to nothing in Wano for him. It's just like this weird offhand line that he says that seems like it's really important, but in actuality has no role in the plot there, and has a very silly basis of origin based on what we saw in God Valley here. So I'm just gonna ignore that stuff and just enjoy the chapter for what it was. I still think the chapter was a 10 out of 10, and I'm really looking forward to the next chapter where we get Roxas flashback. Watch out for this Tuesday's video because I will be breaking down the fight in much greater detail. And with that, I will talk to you all later.